Oh boy, I sure do love 100%ing Hyrule Warriors.
So you may be like a lot of new Nintendo fans and got excited about this a few weeks ago, but have no idea what it is. I'm going to assume not a ton of people have played the originals, so in this video I'm going to cover what to expect from this series of games. From gameplay to completion, I want to explore this topic to get you prepared for when this new game comes out. How do I know I'm qualified? Well, I think that's reason enough. Anyway, enough dilly-dally, let's get started. To get started, I want to dive into Age of Calamity really quickly. This game is not Breath of the Wild 2. I'm not sure if anyone thinks that, but there you go. This is a prequel to the first Breath of the Wild. Basically, just fleshing out the memories that you found in said game around the world from 100 years ago. The War of Calamity, as I like to call it. I'm not 100% sure if it's going to be required to play this to understand Breath of the Wild 2, but I'm leaning towards probably. I have a suspicion that there's going to be some important tidbits that you'll need to know before jumping into the anticipated sequel, considering Aonuma himself approached Koei Tecmo about this. I do know that it won't be some weird and confusing Kingdom Hearts BS because Nintendo's not that evil, I think. Anyway, for the most part this game will most likely be focusing on the story of the 4 other champions that are not Link. Long story short, the end of this game gonna be sad. Think like Halo Reach. Gameplay-wise, however, expect this to be very similar to the original Hyrule Warriors. It'll be pulling a lot of aspects from Breath of the Wild, like I'm sure the maps will be bigger and be a lot more open-ended, but the combat and leveling will remain the same. Anyway, let's move on to the reason why we're here. I present to you a beginner's guide of sorts to Hyrule Warriors and also the Musou games as a whole, because they all play pretty similarly. Hyrule Warriors is a game about killing things to level up and refine your weapons to kill things better. Essentially, you're a one-man army with the task of running around the battlefield completing certain tasks, killing thousands of enemies. It's very much a hack and slash with some basic combos that get better as you progress through the game with some light strategy elements thrown in because this is war after all. There's not really a whole lot of strategy, it just basically boils down to don't let this person get overwhelmed with enemies or protect this thing or don't let the space fall. It seems overwhelming at first, but over time it gets easier to deal with. You can also command other playable warriors to move to certain spaces on the battlefield, but I only ever use this feature to get someone over to a chest that only they can open while I take care of something important. In terms of combat, there is a lot to go over. First off, I guess we'll start with the basic form of attack combos. Each character has a basic 3-hit combo that can be upgraded in their respective skill trees. It can be upgraded to 5 or 6 with just smashing Y, but there's also the X button to account for. You can interrupt your Y combos by hitting X at any point except the very last once everything's been unlocked combo-wise to unleash a more powerful attack that can wipe out a wider range of enemies. Some characters have a wide spread, others have a straight line that it goes through. It all depends on A, which character you're playing as, and B, which weapon you use for them. Yes, each character has different weapons. Now, I'm going to assume that each character in Age of Calamity will have just one weapon since it's looking to be much smaller than the original, seeing as it's just focusing on the one game as opposed to the 9 in Hyrule Warriors. There'll also probably only be like 6 or 7 characters to focus on, which will make completing it so much easier than the first. Each character has their own level and skill trees in Hyrule Warriors that can be filled if you have the right materials, which brings up the biggest turnoff for most people. This game involves a lot of grinding. The max level for all 28 characters in Hyrule Warriors is 255, but in Age of Calamity it'll probably only cap out at 100. That's how it started in the original, but with each DLC and update that got released, they added an extra 5 or 10 levels to the cap. As I mentioned earlier, each character has their own unique weapons and fighting style. In fact, each weapon has their own fighting style. For example, Impa is a light, fast-moving ninja that carries around a big-ass sword that changes her to a heavy-type character with slower combos. Later on, you can unlock a Naginata for her that makes her hit less hard but attack way faster, changing her class completely. Ganondorf is the same way. He gets some big swords to start with, then later on unlocks a spear that makes him way faster. Some characters like Darunia, Fi, and Young Link only have one weapon. This is only really for the DLC characters though, with minor exceptions. Like, what other weapon would Fi use other than herself? On top of that, each weapon has their own level and rank. The levels are shown to you by the number of stars on that weapon. More stars equals stronger weapon. When playing the adventure mode, you'll also come across these spaces with gold swords on them. When you go over them, there'll be a sprite of the weapon and a level next to it with the face of the characters for. If the face is blacked out with a question mark, that means it's a new weapon for someone you haven't unlocked yet. If it's a level, it doesn't mean it's another star, it's actually another rank. New ranks for weapons are infinitely better than even the 5-star level of the previous weapon rank. They also have different names and designs with the max level being 4+. Another way to tell is the attack power right below the design of the weapon on the right. Each level has a fixed attack power, it's not different for weapons or characters. Every weapon raises to the same strength as the other ones when talking about stars. There are also skills for weapons that you can add on for special effects. Whether that be making it easier to juggle enemies, stronger element attacks, or even making a certain attack stronger. Each weapon you pick up will, for the most part, have some sort of skill attached to it that can be fused to other weapons if you think that one is poo-poo garbage. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Just read what the skill does by hitting that there X button, and if you like it but want it on a different weapon, then just fuse it to that weapon if it has an open skill slot. Since this is Zelda, it carries with it the tradition of having items that you carry around with you, such as bombs, arrows, and the boomerang, just to name a few. They're mostly used for bosses, which I'll mention in a bit, but they can be used on most enemies to either stun them or deal some area of effect damage. You can find pickups from pots or enemies that'll temporarily power up the weapons, like having one giant bomb as opposed to several small ones, or being able to pull the f***ing moon out of the sky. What the f***? Yeah, this game knows how balls to the walls crazy it is, and you just have to kind of expect that when going into these games. Age of Calamity will probably be a little more grounded comparatively speaking, but it won't be too far off. Anyway, I personally don't use items that much unless I'm using them for bosses. Bosses appear on the battlefield sometimes, and it just kinda happens. There's no build-up other than when you fight them in the story missions. I mean, you fight them so frequently that I personally would get annoyed with the build-up every single time. You fight them like any other Zelda boss. Just use the item at the right time, then hit them while they're down until they die. There's a meter that you can wear down when you down a boss that, when drained, will unleash a powerful attack that'll drain a significant chunk of their health. All you gotta do is just hit them a bunch. Find the right combo and that meter will drain so quickly you'll have forgotten it was there. Depending on your character's level, you could probably kill them with that attack too. This meter also appears on regular enemies when they do a powerful attack that can be interrupted with the use of certain items, but I don't bother since they will be finished by the time I had it selected and ready to use. For the boss roster we have Charizard, Weaponized Spider, Charles Martinet, the Manhandler, Big Bird, and Hell. Twice! You'll be fighting all of these guys at least once throughout the story, but sometimes they'll show up in adventure mode for no reason. Anyway, I'll talk about adventure mode later on down the line when I give a full review of Hyrule Warriors, but that's not now. Anyway, what sort of objectives do you encounter in Hyrule Warriors? They take many forms, but usually it's kill these certain people, take keeps, or keep the enemy numbers low by slaughtering them like animals. The story missions will usually have their own unique objectives like protecting bomb chews, get the Master Sword, etc. All of these objectives are all about that hack and slash gameplay that I talked about earlier, so make sure that's staying up to snuff. Remember, level up characters, weapons, and skill trees as much as possible. Or you could be like me and use mainly Link so he's over 100 levels above everyone else. I'm not biased, what are you talking about? You can lose in these games though, don't get me wrong. If you die, you restart the entire mission. If one of your other controllable party members die, even when you're not in control of them, you have to restart the mission. If your main keep gets taken by the enemy or the team captain flees, then you have to restart the mission. I make it sound stressful, but it's not as long as you're paying attention to what the little text bubble in the center of the screen says. Make sure you're always checking where the enemy is and where you are on the minimap. That thing is basically your life preserver, and if you lose track of yourself, then I would recommend just moving in a circle till you see your arrow on the map moving around. It'll also show you where your current objective is, as well as where bosses, keeps, and important teammates are. It'll also tell you if your team has taken a keep or killed a captain without you around, and that's super important, so be wary of that. On top of the red enemies, there's also the yellow neutral enemies that appear every so often. They're really just another reason to take keeps. Sometimes they'll have a second commander for you to kill, but other times they can help you out if you damage them enough. It just depends on the situation. Also, help out the chickens. You'll know what I mean when you play the game. It's worth going out of your way for. Just trust me. There are a couple more topics I want to touch on real quick since they might be in Age of Calamity but haven't been confirmed yet. The first is my fairy. I'm not going to go completely in depth here because that'll be saved for my review later on down the line and because there's a lot to go over in that aspect. Anyway, it's probably the most grindy thing in Hyrule Warriors, period. You level up fairies by feeding them food you find from enemy drops in special pots within keeps. Once they reach max level, you can reset them to level 1 and keep 10% of their stats and all skills that they've obtained. These can range from a small full heal, AoE damage, or filling up your special meters. You can also find clothes for them in certain missions, but they only pertain to which element they are. You can find the fairies in special pots, the same ones that you find the food in, but they can only be found in adventure mode when it says so on the map. Speaking of, this was the last topic I wanted to talk about. I know, I'm a big fat liar, but this will probably be an Age of Calamity because it was also in Fire Emblem Warriors. They're just these maps based on different Zelda games where each square on the map is a special mission. In my opinion, this is where the real meat of the game is. Each map has its own gimmicks, ranks to get for each level, with the highest being A, and this is also where you get the higher level weapons and fairies I talked about earlier. If you know what you're doing, missions can last anywhere from 30 seconds to 15 minutes. Some have to be played at least twice to get certain collectibles because the game wants your full attention like a spoiled brat and requires hundreds upon hundreds of hours to get these all done with the earrings and collectibles scattered about. These can be pretty tiring to do all in a row, so take it one at a time. These are basically all the length of one game each. You need to dedicate real boy hours to this. You've either gotta... It may be tiring, but if you're into these kinds of games, then it should be no problem. Get out there and adventure. And with that, I believe I've covered everything that you, a newcomer, need to know. From the simple to the very, very complicated, there's a lot to unpack while playing. It feeds everything to you at a good rate. Like I said, I'm not sure how many of these things will transfer over. I know we've got the different play styles, leveling up and weapon ranking won't change because it's always been like that in the Warriors games, and the combat will stay the same as well. Expect some equivalent to adventure mode. Without it, there wouldn't be much reason to level up all your characters and be strong boys. Not sure if the fairies will return either. I don't really know how people feel about that anyway. By the time that this video comes out, there'll have been a video presentation talking in depth about Age of Calamity, so I'm not sure how much of this will be relevant. Here's hoping there's still some stuff to take away from this to get you prepared. Anyway, I'll see you all next time for a really, really big project I've been working on.
Hey, Kate.
What?
I guess you could say this game Hyrules.
Get out of my house, Nathan.
No.